Good morning, my neighbors. Welcome to another episode of BYTTT. Before you take the trade, I am your host, JD the Great, and I am missing the light. Hold on, we gotta get these lightings right. There we go. That looks a lot better. I am your host, JD the Great. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button. That way, you know when I am online. So let's go ahead and get right to it. There's a lot that we got to talk about, and the first thing I want to kind of have a discussion on is what are they looking for, right? New highs is one of the most trickiest things that you can try to trade, because when it comes down to new highs, a lot of things can go wrong if you are not paying attention. Now, the first thing we're going to rock with is our commodities. You already know that's how we operate. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So we got NQ. Here's NQ. And you can kind of see it's just been making these highs. Let me get rid of these drawings. It's been making these highs, and we already passed our December rejection. So these downtrends are completely affected because the original pivot is over here. So what do we do now? So what that means is a major trend has been defeated by a micro trend. What does that look like? So before December actually went ahead and panned out the way that it did, this was our major trend, right? And you could kind of see it struggled at it. So what should have been a rejection and maybe a continuation to make new lower lows was very, very important to this ticker. But again, that's why when the markets start to do that too fast of a drop, start drawing the trend lines. The trend lines is going to guide you, because eventually they got to go ahead and pivot and reverse at a certain key level, and it looks like that key level was back here roughly in April. So how does that look along the charts? Let's go ahead and look at that, and you'll see right here, this is our micro trend. I know it doesn't look much like a micro trend, but if I turn around and did one of these situations where I just erased all of this, it looks a little bit different. We already know this is a major trend because this is one point and there's a second point, and they've been making lower lows ever since they broke this level over here, right? So this is why it's very important that you understand where the market could go, because if you could understand where it could go, then you can plan on its reaction when it gets there. So what do I do with this information? Well, now this is no longer a trend in itself. They broke it, right? They try to get back under it, but now what was that micro trend here? They put pressure, which should have like failed, and then it's almost like a bucket that is holding a whole lot of like waterfall water. Like it's trying to hold everything up, and then out of nowhere they got enough support, and then they pushed it right, and they could take more. That's what it is. So instead of it bending right, it bent here, then it bent again here, did it bend again, bent again, bent again, and this is the bend that happened here that it just flat out did not break. And since it did not break, then that means this is our new major trend. And if you think about it, well, if we're this is the major trend and that was the micro trend, well, what was the trend before this actually happened? Well, I love to go back all the way to the pandemic, because the pandemic tells you that a lot of people that probably got involved in the trading, it was a big dynamic for a lot of people. I got into options trading because of the pandemic, right? So that kind of gives a little bit of dynamic in that regard. So now we got this point right here that they use as support. Actually, let's go ahead and tweak that to this one here. I want to get the lowest of lowest points. And you can kind of see nice solid bounce. You can't move that trend line until we broke this pivot here. And you'll see right here, that pivot has been tested multiple times. What was previous resistance turns into support, and since they went ahead and did a beeline right here to test it as support, look what it did. Nice solid bounce right there. So what do we do with this information? Well, I like to always draw enough trend lines until I can't make trend lines anymore. So right here, you can see this drop here. And since this is that pivot that made new highs, Let me zoom in over there just to make sure I got everything right. Yep, that looks good. And since this is the micro trend that we started with, but now it made higher highs. Now this is our pivot. So what does that all mean, Jeff? Okay, so now because we're starting to make new highs, I'm going to look at what are the potential extensions out of these legs. I love using my Fibonacci's, and I like to do it in a way that I put like some numbers here. Actually, no, not this one. Let me do something fun for y'all. I have one that I call. Is it? You know, it might be that one, but we'll use this one, and I'll do some extensions of it. All right. So what I like to do is have some negative numbers here. Let's go with negative 236. Oh, actually, 0. Okay, there we go. All right, 0 to 36, and then we'll add a negative negative 0. Oh Lord. Okay, that's interesting. My mic wasn't on this whole time. All right. I think everything should be good. All right, let me go ahead and rewind this whole entire thing. I don't believe that my mic wasn't working. Thank you. I appreciate that. Letting me know. All right, so let's get back over to, because yeah, I don't know which part ended up losing the mic. That's very interesting. All right, so NQF, where it is right now, what I'm looking for it to do is actually hold above this level. I'm going to probably throw a fib throughout today and see which level is next. I got a negative 236 and a negative 618. Of course, this is for a reversal. That will be this side. And then this side will be the top side in itself. So if today finishes very strong and bullish, I may do something very, very similar across the board and get this to push on up. All right, so let's go ahead and get into CL. CL, where it is right now, it's doing something that I'm not really a fan of. I know that it was supposed to be coming down. I know that it will try to get to this level, but when it kind of gapped up again for the second time, I know the war is around, and we get our oil from countries in the Middle East like Iran and that whole pass. But the problem that I have with this is that it looks like it wants to get higher, but this rejection lets me know that there's a lot of sellers that exist somewhere around here. So look for oil to try to test. If it breaks this level right here, this is going to make things very interesting. We may consolidate even more. But this inverse head and shoulder, that whole move is over. All right, let's go over to gold. Gold is making a nice little move here. I listen. I'm not saying that it's going to go ahead and drop to the dirt or anything like that, but this is leaving me to be a little concerned of what's the next explosion. Right now, I have bearish divergences all around here, especially like this one here that came and led to this, but we didn't really go anywhere. And then we're kind of like, here's this one and this one. That is that bearish divergence, and it's not going anywhere. So does it take out all that sell side liquidity and push to the upside, or does this just dump, maybe come back to the 200 moving average, maybe even retest like 3,000 for psychological levels? Let me go ahead and write down 3,000 so I can be right on it, or something like that. These are the two areas that it probably could end up. All right, next one is, oops, I just hit the wrong button. There we go. All right, the next one we got, it is a silver. Like I said, I chart this. Silver already did its turnaround, unlike how gold did. This turnaround barely went anywhere. So if silver drags gold, I think when it makes this higher high, it's probably going to drag gold around and bring it into that upper register and that level. Let's see how that goes. All right, and then the next one is British pound. Look at that massive move. This is what really gave a lot of pressure to the US dollar, was because the British pound is bouncing. Now remember, this is the British pound that did the whole Brexit thing. They lost a lot of value when they detached from the European Union. So this could be that recovery stage for them and get a nice little bounce. This is 2021, roughly around the time we talked about or finalized Brexit. I think Brexit really kind of started mid 2018. I would have to probably go in my history books for that one, but you can see we're starting to get to those levels here, and that's what's putting pressure on the US dollar. So very interesting as we get here. Does it do a massive rejection here? If it does, that means there is going to be a strong rally on the US dollar. All right, now ES, we are finally above that level. Right, this is the level for the all-time highs on ES. It just trucked its way all the way up. Our high at this level was 61.6650, and currently prices has hit the high of 61.71. This tells me that at the end of the day, we're probably going to be sitting on the shoulders of all this price movement on ES, and maybe get ES into like 6,200, 61.74, somewhere around there is going to be that true rejection, because this is the movement that got us up into that area. All right, and then the next one is the Russell. Russell, that you can see they're pulling, and I've explained this before. If the market on NQ is moving up and it's making a nice little push to that side, look for Russell to start to drop, because these are your smaller caps. There's more cash to be made on an international market than in the domestic market. A lot of the individuals that's in here in the Russell are most of your domestic stuff. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and keep this going. All right, so yes, I want to see what they do with this level. I think it could reject again at 21.94, and then we're going to get a true rally on the market, but we just got to keep that in mind. All right, and then the last one is the US dollar. Remember what I said? Looks like a W. We got under here, and I said there's a possibility now that we got under here, we could reject right off of it and continue to the downside. We got our breaking structure a lot earlier. These were the micro trends that was getting there. They destroyed that one. Then they destroyed that one. Then they destroyed that one with yesterday. Hold on, was yesterday's close? Was it? Yeah, with yesterday's close. So that's our gap down. That's why we're pushing up. So look for that to continue. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of these tickers. All right. Couple of tickers I'm watching. Let me get my list here. Oh, Netflix. Let's start with Netflix. Now, Netflix is in a very interesting spot, right? And it is. I'm going to come down to a 2 hour. Let's look at it for a 2 hour. So the reason why I'm looking at Netflix was because when we came down to this level, I was thinking we could really fill into this imbalance and come down. Now, Netflix is probably going to toy around a little bit, especially that they made new highs. But this nice little, let's call that tweezer top type of action, lets us know that all the buyers that stepped into here, a lot of sellers took them over and it continued down. So I'm very curious on what the price action does when we open today. It could be just some news that's going to go ahead and flip this on its head. Maybe it pushes up. But what it looks like to me, it looks like we're going to get a nice solid move into this candle and then this candle and then probably bounce over here at this point. But we already resetted the oscillator over here. The MACD is in that upper register. And if you think about it on the daily, this thing had a massive move. But it was a very interesting pullback here. Could this has been a fair value gap build? Very possible. Very possible. It just all depends on how the market reacts. Right now, it's up pre-market by $5. All right, let's go with Meta. Meta is in a very interesting spot too. I have a tiny position on this. I am considering to possibly add to that. But yeah, it looks like we get a nice little solid move. I think anything above 700 is good. I want to see them break above this one. I think it's a 716. Yeah, 716, 718. Then we could probably fill into this area and get into that 721. My target I'm looking for is above 740, which will go ahead and take out the highs over here on Meta and then continue this whole entire party. I think they're a strong company. They already paid their dividends and they had a nice little reversal after having a nice little push down. All right. Let's go with, oh my God, let's go with Coin real quick. Coin is not stopping. I'm going to look for that video where I was breaking this down. I was looking for possible M. I did say that there was a possibility that this trend line could relatively hold. And right when we got into this area, they took out all that sell side liquidity. And this thing did not play. Had a nice little break, retest, and continuation. Could this thing get to 400? That is a very interesting and very possible number. It's a little far removed for me to look for a position, but I am very curious on what it does. Let's see what else I got for y'all. UNH. Let's go with that one. UNH. Now, UNH, I am not a fan of where it is. I think it's going to fail that 300 level. It's just taking too long to get up here and start to really put some pressure on 334, which makes me think that the market has some doubts into it. If this thing fails 300, I think it's going to go straight to 236, and that's going to be a cascading type of effect, hitting a lot of people's stop losses. The momentum is going to be too great for them to slow it down, and we're probably going to test 250 one more time. So very interesting to see, when do we break above 334? Are they still accumulating? Very interesting. All right, what else we got? We got IBM. IBM, it's been on a tear, right? And it had, from the time that it broke out from here, you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 green candles. So this was a nice little healthy pullback. I think it could probably pull back just a little bit further to kind of make it a little healthy. That's if it wants to. But again, this is like the godfather of AI. I like this ticker, and I want to see more on the upside. A nice little retest to like 287 or maybe like 283 would have been really, really cool. But looking at this, especially with the pre-market, they haven't made that higher highs. If this thing can give a higher low, lower high around here, maybe break to like 295 and then reverse, this thing could probably start to fall into that 287. So just keep an eye on that. What else we got? We got Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean, it got back on its track. It had a nice little pullback, and I was wondering, is it going to make higher highs? And then we kind of wicked this, and I was like, they kind of took out some buy side liquidity, but you guys see it gapped up, they held it, a nice little bounce off a 382 level, which added to this continuation. So I want to see more from Royal Caribbean, maybe even get to $300. Very possible. Apple. Apple is driving me crazy. I did, and this is just telling you how consolidation works. Unlike the other tickers that kind of used that April and then kind of bounced and continued, this thing kind of did a bounce and then they just sat there trying to hold 200. I was very curious on 213. I thought it could get back up there. They failed to do that. So now I'm trying to figure out, are they going to hold 200? It's toyed under 200 a couple of times, but this is also an order block. If we look left, this is an area that was support. This was resistance. Resistance, its first iteration of coming into here. And of course, we got all-time highs. They really wanted that 200 back in the pandemic days. So looking at it right now, if this failed here, I won't be surprised they come back to pandemic levels. That's just what it looks like. So I think they're making a beeline of like, hey, save Apple. But the only thing is, investors are probably concerned about Apple. No real new products. And they have a very overpriced goggles that everybody's kind of hesitant. It's kind of hard to spend $3,000 on some wearable tech. All right, and then the last one I'm probably going to go over before I go into the third month is I've been staring at UPS. I've been really, really staring at UPS. I think it's doing almost the same thing with Apple. The only difference is their drop off already hit their base back into like pandemic levels, right? So this is a lot of junk for you to try to go through to get it down under this level. Could they be accumulated at this level so that way they can extend it down to the downside? Very possible. Is it probable? Probably not, but it's very possible because again, this does look like a very major bear flag for the most part. Like we got a nice little pull here, nice little pull up. And if that thing kind of starts to break down, this thing breaks that level, this thing could go ahead and give that whole entire pull down to the bottom. If you don't know much about UPS, they still send money to their shareholders. $21 billion is nothing to sneeze at. But I just think they're a poorly run company, unlike your FedEx, which FedEx might be a little bit of smoke letting us know that they're trying to push this thing back up. Again, this one has not hit their pandemic levels, again, because they ran a lot better. But, you know, UPS losing that contract with Amazon and Amazon's doing their own delivery did not help. So looking at this in its totality, I would say you may have yourself a nice little situation where FedEx starts to do the run and then it drags UPS with it. Be careful. We're getting a little bit of a big cross over here. All right, what else I got for y'all? So the third month, I'm adding a lot more information. Shout out to Rod, because Rod put me up on MU. I haven't looked at this thing in like forever. They had earnings yesterday, which was very solid. They returned more money to shareholders. If somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, guess what, JD? I just found an extra $437 million. You telling me you're not going to invest into it? What to do, Rod? Good morning, right? You're going to be like, oh, well, if you find an extra money and revenue, what's that EPS looks like? How much profit can you? I found an extra 19% too. Oh man, you're my best friend. We're gonna go ahead and roll with you. And I think that's what's happening here. That they're finding great profits. It sounds really, really good. They do pay a dividend slightly after earnings. So this rally can hit this brick wall, use the dividends to kind of get back to this deviation. And that could bring us back to like 115. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying for you to just pile into it. But if it holds this line with a nice little key support, maybe a nice little reversal here, this thing could probably give you a nice little continuation. I have a fair value gap up around 150. This would make things very interesting because this is one of the laggers in the semiconductor space. They don't do anything really fancy like AI, but again, it's a semiconductor company. We're gonna always need them. What else I got in month 3? We could just run through the whole entire thing. So in month 3, I have this pretty baby over here. This is Costco, and I kind of warned y'all about that $1,000 mark. I had a feeling it was going to push a little bit lower. Did not play it down only because I would have wanted to be in here. So I just want to see how they deal with this mosh pit. Kind of have an evening star. If you don't know what an evening star is, we got a nice little rally. The rally is exhausted, so it puts a star position. The star position signals a reversal, hence dojis signal reversals. That's a doji. That's a doji. So now when we get to this point, not only did they take out the level, they took out that whole entire wick here, which let us know that the sellers have a lot more control than they're really saying. And this thing could go ahead and start to test some of this level. Look for Costco to test 974 in the near future. CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is really trying to get to that 500 level. We made new highs. And I had this line on here, and I never made an adjustment. Oh, let's get that corrected. Let's get that down here. Never made an adjustment. So now that we made the new highs, there it goes. That's how it looks. Look at that pretty little thing right there. But yeah, that 500 level, we got really, really, really high up in it. We got it to that 541. But again, we got this one. Where are you? Why did I put 580? Maybe I was just being lazy. Might have been lazy. Possibly. I thought we got all-time highs. Well, this is all-time highs. What do we do with all-time highs? Just like I said with NQ. Same thing. I would be looking for, can it hold above this area, which they're giving a nice little solid bounce, right? In pre-market, getting above that 495. I want to see it get above 495.50 at the open, and then the new highs will probably test into 503, maybe 508, but then we just rejected off of this peak at 541 cents. Let's see if new supporters come in here. Very interesting ticker. This is Ulta. Ulta is one of the ones that kind of confuses me because it always gaps, especially at earnings. Look at that gap here. Look at that gap here. And look at this one. This was more like a spike up. This one didn't gap, but it gapped down. So it tends to do that. I think they wanted to fill this area here, and it's struggling to do so. So Ulta, I want to see them kind of test this area here. If it breaks below 454 with some strength, maybe place some puts down into 426 for a nice little bounce. But again, those gap fills are pretty tricky. You can kind of see island gap after island gap after island gap. And it's usually the gap that takes out the gap versus there being a fill. Well, this one was kind of like a fill right here. And this one, and gap into it, and then they filled it. Yeah, it's just one of those things. There's just no rebalance of this area here. Very interesting to see what happens there. All right. Adobe annoyed me. I thought we was going to get ourselves a nice little solid move to the upside earlier this month. Yeah, especially how we kind of like held this downward trend. We built the micro trend. They came back to the original deviation. So this one goes out the window. So I'm curious on what they do at this level. I think they could start to go ahead and push into it, but I don't know. It's just one of those ones that this order block is giving tough pressure. If this thing starts to fail, and this is probably the cheapest you're going to get to it, or as far as cheap as exposure, as long as it doesn't get under 370, this could be a ticker that gets all the way into the 429s, doing like a double bottom. And I was very interested on that pivot here. This is what I kind of circled, and that pivot is the one that's the micro trend that's been putting pressure onto here, breaking our original trend line. So look for Adobe to try and attempt to push up. And if we look at the daily with our oscillators, nice little curl right there. Very interesting. All right, let's keep this going. ACN, Zscaler, it's in the cybersecurity space, kind of like your CrowdStrike, Datadog, and everything else. So I'm looking for this one to continue to the upside. If we look at the weekly, this is what they're looking for. And I think we're more towards the top for rejection than we are to the bottom. But again, if we do our trend lines like we always do, this is what they broke, and it hasn't looked back ever since. They tested it here, found the support, and continued up. And it basically screamed at all the bears, get out the way, I'm coming through. Nice solid W move. So if we were going to measure for a W pattern, we would be measuring the shorter side, which would be probably about here. And this is why I say it's a little exhausted, because when I do these, I usually aim for the 50% of it, which would bring us to our target is already acquired over here. It can continue for the rest, right? But this is pretty much ready to reverse. We'll see what happens. Maybe even get a little bit of a rebalance. Maybe put it in a bull flag and then continue up. All right, so let's go with AVGO. Excuse me, I just had a little hiccup. AVGO looks like this. Another one that I like in the semiconductor space. Oh, that is a new high on the day. Oh, that should be interesting. Look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Nice little pivot right here. Let's see if we can get across to the MACD. Then I would say probably continue to the upside on this one, even though it's in its upper register. The reason why I'm saying that is because the weekly looks like this. Party just started. And if I go over to the monthly, they tried to sell it and it reopened. So very interesting ticker at its position. Let's see what they do with that one. I already kind of went over FedEx, kind of gave you an idea on that one. Darden Restaurants, hard to trade. Dick's used to be good in the pandemic. Target is missing every one of their targets. This is just so bad. I really felt like they could have easily bounced a long time ago. If you don't know what happened with Target, they had a lot of over surplus of inventory because of the pandemic. So they ramped up what they stored. They stored way too much for the demand, which then flipped it on the head. They had to like sell off at losses. So a low around here, their EPS was like really, really terrible. They was returning no money to shareholders. People kind of ran away from them, but they're starting to return money to shareholders, right? And it hasn't really recovered from a stock standpoint. Then you got this junk that happened, but I think that's just people in their feelings. Then they got this junk that happened, but I think, again, $25 billion company, still return money to shareholders. Just what is that valuation? I think the real number is like that $90, $95. That's why we keep on building this base. I think there's more upside than downside on this one. Still pays dividends monthly, and $1 is not bad. $1 for something that's under $100. You know, if you can accumulate enough shares, build up your dividends, you should be able to get good profits out of that one. Signet Jewelers, and kind of hard to trade now. DocuSign, I think this thing is just a few more mango seasons from the dirt. Yeah, I don't see anything positive. There's so many new variations unless they invested into AI and find a way to automate document signing somehow to make a better product. But there's like Adobe that came for their lunch money. There's this thing that somebody made me sign called PandaDoc. Like, there's just so many ways to do e-signatures now. I think Google has one. It's just all over the place. So they don't have that moat that everybody is looking for. So I think this thing would never be at pandemic levels again unless they start to acquire something. If we look at their earnings, you'll see $76 million, almost $1 in EPS. They're not going anywhere. During their time when the pandemic was really taking off, this is what was happening. It was starting to turn positive, finding more revenue. They're like, sky's the limit. Wait a minute, how come you're not returning more money to shareholders? Okay, we're feeling a little uncomfortable. And then now it got into here where they started. Okay, revenue's going up, but no, there is no strong EPS. I think this base is built on that. They're looking for more on the EPS. If it continues that way, cool. If they trim the fat a little bit, maybe they can keep some more of that revenue, giving more to the shareholders. Maybe a dividend is in order. I don't think they ever did a dividend, but I don't think they're that growth company that everybody's screaming for. Can they capture this gap? I lean on no, but maybe some major acquirement will help. Not Best Buy. Kroger looked really, really good. I haven't looked at this in a very long time, but they had made new highs. They've been expanding really. I don't know if you have a Kroger in your neighborhood, but I've seen them all over the place because they got their own version of like a delivery system. So yeah, they got a lot going for them. So very interesting on that. Nike. I don't know what's going on. I thought this thing would recover at one point. I think it was the pandemic low. Yep. It was this. I was looking for them to get above that 61. Right now, pre-market, we're above that right now, right? But again, this is our pandemic low around 2020. I thought it would just bounce. Could this be a sweep and then they start to really get this bump and run rolling? Very possible, because this is our break right now. So I'm looking for a solid break of this level. Actually, you know what? Because I keep on saying I'm going to put alerts. I don't put alerts. I'm going to put alert right here. And ampersand and run breakout. I put it in the wrong spot. I want to put it on the title. There we go. So we'll see if that actually breaks out. Box, still don't understand how they make money, but this is a very solid company. If you don't know Box.com, this is your online storage information. Kind of like what Google Docs does. But I don't know. They still return money to shareholders. This one is probably the float. That's what it is. Yeah, it's the float. They don't have a lot of shares outstanding, so this thing can push up. So yeah, I would say just keep this on your radar, but it's not going to have a lot of volume. So just, this is Zim. I don't know if y'all remember this. This was that company that was paying crazy dividends. People piled into it. 93 cents. So they returned the dividends again? Oh, $3? Oh, it's back to 74. This thing is so annoying. Oh my God, look at this. So it had 23 cents dividend, then 93 cents. So people probably just like, oh, it's paying dividends. Let's go in there. Then now it's paid $3.65. People was like, oh, I am taking my money as fast as I can out of that one. Because right there, 317. It is now to 74, this last one. Oh, I'll be upset here. I would be upset. HUT, it used to really follow Bitcoin, but it's not really following suit now. So that's very interesting. Oh, we already got our news. All right. I got lost into the tickers. Let's go ahead and grab our news. Today's news was... All right, we got GDP sales. That's nothing. Corporate profits. GDP growth rate. It is bearish for the dollar. Ooh, that's interesting. Quarter over quarter. Let's see. Balance of trade. Ooh, bearish for the dollar again. And this makes sense, especially with tariffs going on, right? Durable goods is bullish for the dollar. Jobless claim is bearish for... All of this is bearish, bearish, and bearish. All of it's bearish. So this is going to be very interesting. I think we could get some pullbacks on some of your favorite tickers, and then this can go ahead and give us a nice little push. Let's go check out what happened in our charts and see what NQ did when that news dropped. All right, let's grab the 15-minute. A little bit of a pullback here. I won't be surprised if they gave it a bounce here. Like a bounce that gets more highs. That's what I'm considering. Maybe that was the 15-minute 50 EMA here. There's a little bit of an order block right here. Same. Just where we tweezed the top back here in the morning of yesterday. Yeah, I would say this is just, we got a minute, an hour and 23 minutes on this candle. I won't be surprised if this 4 hour completely turns back green, especially as the market opens. So 10 o'clock, I won't be surprised it's a green candle. The doji, the daily, we came off of this hammer doji right here, and if we can close the day above that previous wick, I think we could get ourselves a nice little key support. Look for NQ to get above 22,548 and hold. All right, let's go ahead and run through the rest of them. We got ourselves oil, not really much of an effect. Oil inventory yesterday is the one that kind of gave it that hammer against that order block that was a previous support. So I'm looking for continuation to that downside. We'll see what happens there. Gold is pulling back down for a little bit, which makes things interesting. Same with silver. British pound, it's still pulling back here. Yep. looks like it's about to break support. Probably going to come down some more. ES, again, it already made its new high. So this could have been a nice little cool down, knowing that they made the new high already on ES, and they're just going ahead and reposition themselves somewhere lower. Russell, that should have had a nice little effect on it because it usually just stays in par. Yep, that's that. And then the dollar could maybe it could be that this whole entire downtrend on the dollar is probably getting some reaction, something like that. And what they're doing is testing to see where the next one is going to reject. Here's a gap here, so look for 97,602. Especially we was at that 96 again. Even though these are decimal places, I still respect them as zeros and fives, like psychological level. Just like, for example, this level here at 97.